One promise a day. Keep one promise to yourself every day and change your life. Published by Midnight Audiobook. Introduction. Your life is built on broken promises. You have probably made hundreds of promises to yourself. Tomorrow, you'll wake up earlier. You'll start exercising on Monday. You'll finally finish that book, save more money, spend less time on your phone, or stop putting important things off. In those moments, the promise feels real. You mean every word. But somewhere between good intentions and daily life, the promise quietly disappears. At first, it doesn't seem like a big deal. Missing one workout feels harmless. Skipping one morning alarm seems normal. Delaying one goal until next week sounds reasonable. But these moments leave behind something you cannot see. Every promise you break teaches your mind one dangerous lesson. Your own words cannot always be trusted. That is where real change begins or ends. Confidence is not born from talent. Discipline is not created by motivation. Success is not built by wishing for a better future. They all grow from one simple habit, trusting yourself enough to do what you said you would do. This book offers a different path. It is not about becoming perfect. It is not about impossible routines or endless motivation. It is about making one meaningful promise to yourself every day and keeping it. The promise can be small, but the act of keeping it changes something far greater than your schedule. It changes your identity. A year from now, your life will reflect the promises you chose to honor, one day at a time. Your future is never built by the promises you make. It is built by the promises you keep. Today is the perfect day to keep the first one. Chapter 1. The day you stop lying to yourself. The easiest person to disappoint is often the one waiting for you in the mirror. No argument follows. No one complains. Life simply moves on, and because the consequences are quiet, the disappointment becomes easy to ignore. That silence is what makes it so dangerous. A promise to wake up earlier turns into another tap on the snooze button. A plan to exercise becomes, "I'll start tomorrow." The book stays on the shelf. The money that was supposed to be saved is spent. The phone is picked up for just 5 minutes, and an hour disappears. Each choice feels too small to matter. Each excuse sounds reasonable. Yet something changes every time a promise is broken. The loss is rarely the missed workout or the unfinished chapter. It is the quiet message sent to your own mind. My words do not always mean action. At first, that message is almost impossible to notice, but after weeks, months, and years, it becomes part of the way you see yourself. You stop expecting yourself to follow through because history keeps proving otherwise. People often believe they lack discipline, motivation, or willpower. They search for better planners, new routines, inspiring videos, or the perfect morning schedule. Those things can be useful, but they cannot solve a problem that begins much deeper. Before discipline fails, honesty usually fails first. Self-deception rarely looks dramatic. It wears the clothes of reasonable excuses. "I'm too busy today. I'll have more energy next week. Now isn't the right time. I'll start on Monday." These thoughts sound responsible because they promise future action. The problem is that tomorrow keeps replacing today until months disappear without meaningful change. Every excuse protects us from discomfort for a few minutes. At the same time, it quietly steals something much more valuable: trust in ourselves. The strange part is that we would never accept this behavior from someone else for very long. If a friend repeatedly promised to help and never showed up, we would stop believing them. Yet, many people spend years making promises to themselves that they never intend to keep. The distance between the life you dream about and the life you live is rarely created in a single moment. It grows one decision at a time. Every broken promise adds another small step to that distance. Eventually, the person you hope to become begins to feel like someone else entirely. Not because you lack talent, but because you slowly stopped believing your own words. Daniel understood this better than anyone, although it took him years to admit it. Every Sunday evening, he promised himself that Monday would be different. He would wake up early, go for a walk, eat healthier, and spend an hour learning new skills. Monday arrived with good intentions, but by evening he had convinced himself that work was exhausting and next Monday would be a better time to begin. Weeks became months. Months became years. His life did not fall apart overnight. It simply stayed the same. One evening, Daniel noticed something unsettling. He no longer felt excited when making promises to himself because he already expected to break them. That realization hurt more than any missed goal. He had not lost confidence because life was difficult. He had lost confidence because he had taught himself that his own promises carried no weight. Instead of creating another ambitious plan, he made one small promise. He would read 5 pages before going to bed every night. Nothing more, no complicated routine, no impossible schedule, just 5 pages. The first night felt ordinary. The second felt easier. After a few weeks, something unexpected happened. The pages mattered less than the fact that he had kept his word. For the first time in years, he began seeing himself as someone who finished what he started. That small victory changed more than his reading habit. It changed the relationship he had with himself. Once he trusted himself with one promise. Keeping a second promise no longer felt impossible. The change was not sudden or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and real because it was built on honesty instead of excitement. This is where every disciplined life truly begins, not with a motivational speech, not with a new planner, not with waiting for the perfect moment. It begins the day you stop pretending that excuses are harmless. It begins when you admit that the promises you keep matter far more than the promises you make. Honesty is the first act of discipline because it refuses to hide behind circumstances. It says, "This is where I am. These are the promises I have broken. These are the choices that brought me here." That truth may feel uncomfortable, but it is also incredibly freeing. Once you stop lying to yourself, you no longer waste energy protecting excuses. All of that energy becomes available for change. You do not need to become a different person overnight. You only need to become a truthful one. The moment you keep one promise after years of breaking them, something powerful begins to return. It is not motivation, it is not confidence, it is trust. Every disciplined life starts with one honest decision. The greatest obstacle has rarely been a lack of time, talent, or opportunity. It has been the quiet habit of breaking promises to ourselves. The good news is that the same daily choices that weakened your self-trust can rebuild it, one promise at a time. Chapter 2. The invisible contract you make every morning. Every sunrise arrives with the same quiet question. Will you become the person you promised yourself yesterday? The world never asks it out loud, yet the answer is written in the first choices you make after opening your eyes. Before anyone sees you, before work begins, before messages appear on your phone, you have already started shaping the kind of person you will be today. The morning is more than the beginning of another day. It is the beginning of another agreement with yourself. You may not notice it, but every morning you make small promises. You tell yourself you'll get up when the alarm rings. You'll drink a glass of water instead of reaching for your phone. You'll spend a few quiet minutes reading, stretching, writing, or simply preparing your mind for the day ahead. These promises seem ordinary, because they take only a few minutes. Yet they quietly decide the direction of the hours that follow. Many people believe their day is ruined by unexpected problems, difficult co-workers, or a busy schedule. More often, the day begins to drift long before any of those things happen. It begins with the first decision to delay, avoid, or choose comfort over commitment. One extra snooze becomes another. A quick look at social media becomes half an hour of scrolling. The simple plan for the morning disappears before breakfast, and with it goes the feeling that today will be different. The first promise of the day carries a special kind of power because it sets a standard. When you keep it, you remind yourself that your decisions matter. When you break it, you quietly tell yourself that today's intentions can wait until tomorrow. That message follows you through the rest of the day, influencing choices you may never connect to that first moment. Think about how different the day feels when you begin by doing exactly what you planned. It is not because the task itself changes your life. Making the bed, drinking water, reading a few pages, or taking a short walk are simple actions. Their real value is much deeper. They become proof that your words and your actions still belong together. Farah learned this lesson without changing her entire life overnight. She worked long hours, often felt exhausted, and constantly promised herself that she would become more organized when things settled down. But life never seemed to settle down. Every morning started with hitting the snooze button, checking notifications, rushing out the door, and promising that tomorrow would be different. One evening, she decided to stop chasing perfect mornings. Instead, she made one promise that felt almost too small to matter. She would wake up when her first alarm rang and spend 10 quiet minutes reading before touching her phone. Nothing else needed to change. The first week was not exciting. There were no dramatic breakthroughs. Some mornings felt difficult, and the temptation to return to old habits was strong. But she kept her promise anyway. After several weeks, she noticed something unexpected. She no longer started the day feeling behind. More importantly, she trusted herself a little more each morning because she had done what she said she would do. That growing trust spread into other parts of her life. She found it easier to eat healthier, finish important work, and keep commitments she once avoided. None of those improvements began because she suddenly became more motivated. They began because one small promise taught her that she could rely on herself again. This is how discipline quietly grows. It rarely announces itself with dramatic moments or life-changing decisions. It grows through ordinary mornings that look almost boring from the outside. Every time you keep a promise before the day becomes busy, you place another brick in the foundation of your character. Those bricks may seem small, but over time they build a life that feels steady, confident, and intentional. There will still be mornings when you feel tired. Some days will begin with unexpected problems. Perfection is not the goal. The goal is to protect the agreement you make with yourself each morning. Even if the promise is small, keeping it reminds you that your future is shaped by your actions, not your intentions. A new day does not ask you to become a completely different person. It simply offers another opportunity to become a little more trustworthy than you were yesterday. Every morning gives you a blank page, but only your choices decide the story that will be written on it. Tomorrow morning, another quiet contract will be waiting for you. No one else will know whether you honored it. No applause will follow if you do. Yet every promise you keep will become another reason to believe in yourself. And the person you become tomorrow will always be shaped by the promises you choose to keep today. Chapter 3. One promise is enough. Big plans often fail before they ever have the chance to become real. Not because they are impossible, but because they ask too much from a person who is still trying to believe in themselves. We convince ourselves that change must be dramatic to matter. So we decide that tomorrow we will wake up earlier, exercise every day, eat perfectly, read more, save money, stop procrastinating, learn a new skill, and finally organize our lives. By the time the list is finished, the journey has already become exhausting. The desire behind these plans is genuine. People truly want better health, stronger relationships, greater confidence, and a more meaningful life. The problem is not a lack of ambition. The problem is believing that an entire life can be rebuilt in a single day. Real change has never worked that way. Every time we overload ourselves with too many promises, we create too many chances to fail. Missing one habit begins to affect the others. Soon, the morning workout is skipped, the healthy meal becomes fast food, the book stays closed, and the whole plan is abandoned. Then comes the familiar thought, "I'll start again next Monday." What looked like a lack of discipline was often nothing more than an impossible expectation. This book offers a much simpler path. One promise is enough. Not 10 promises, not a perfect routine, not an ideal version of yourself that somehow never gets tired, distracted, or overwhelmed. Just one meaningful promise that you decide to keep today. That promise might be reading 5 pages before bed. It might be walking for 15 minutes after dinner. It might be drinking enough water, writing 1 paragraph, practicing a skill for 10 minutes, or putting your phone away during family dinner. The promise itself is not what changes your life. The act of keeping it does. Every completed promise sends a quiet message to your mind. I do what I say I will do. That message is far more powerful than it first appears. When you repeat it day after day, your identity begins to shift. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who constantly starts over. You begin seeing yourself as someone who follows through. That change is invisible at first, but it influences every future decision. A man named Karim discovered this after years of chasing impossible reading goals. Every January, he bought several books, convinced that this would finally be the year he became a consistent reader. He planned to finish a book every week. The excitement lasted a few days before work became busy, evenings became tiring, and the books slowly gathered dust on the shelf. Each unfinished book made him feel disappointed. Eventually, he stopped buying them altogether because they had become reminders of broken promises rather than opportunities to learn. One evening, he decided to lower the goal instead of abandoning it. His new promise sounded almost too small to matter. He would read only 5 pages every day, even on busy days, even when he felt tired, even when he wasn't in the mood. 5 pages never felt overwhelming. Some nights he stopped after exactly 5. Other nights he continued reading because getting started was the hardest part. Weeks passed, then months. Without forcing himself, he finished more books than he had read in the previous several years. Something even more important changed. He no longer described himself as a person who wanted to read. He became someone who did read. That difference changed far more than the number of books on his shelf. It changed the way he saw himself. Small victories have a remarkable way of growing into larger ones. They create momentum because success feels familiar instead of accidental. Every fulfilled promise becomes another piece of evidence that you can trust yourself. Over time, your actions begin to match the person you always hope to become. People often underestimate consistency because it looks ordinary. Reading 5 pages seems insignificant compared to finishing an entire book. Saving a small amount of money seems unimportant compared to building wealth. Walking for 15 minutes hardly compares to running a marathon, but extraordinary results are almost always built from ordinary actions repeated without interruption. Intensity feels exciting because it creates the illusion of rapid progress. Consistency feels slow because it asks for patience, yet intensity burns brightly for a few days, while consistency keeps moving forward long after excitement disappears. This is why today's promise matters more than tomorrow's perfect plan. You do not need to fix your entire life before the sun sets. You do not need to become the strongest, smartest, or most disciplined version of yourself overnight. You only need to keep the one promise you choose today. Tomorrow will bring another opportunity, but it cannot replace the promise that belongs to this day. An extraordinary life is never built all at once. It is built one decision, one action, and one promise at a time. The promise you keep today may seem small, but it is shaping someone much bigger than today's version of you. Every fulfilled promise becomes another brick in the foundation of your future. Never underestimate the power of one promise honestly kept. It will always carry more weight than the most perfect plan that never leaves your imagination. Chapter 4. Why Motivation Always Leaves. Motivation has earned a reputation it never deserved. It is often treated as the secret behind every great achievement, as though successful people wake up every morning full of excitement and determination. The truth is much simpler and far more freeing. Motivation is one of the least reliable emotions you will ever experience. It arrives without warning, stays for a while, and eventually leaves. Building your future on something so unpredictable is like building a house on shifting sand. Think about how often your feelings change in a single day. You wake up energized, then feel tired by afternoon. One conversation lifts your mood, while another leaves you frustrated. Some mornings you feel unstoppable. For others, even the smallest task feels difficult. Emotions were never designed to remain constant. That is why promises tied to emotions are so easily broken. Many people unknowingly make this mistake. They tell themselves, "I'll start exercising when I feel motivated. I'll write when inspiration comes. I'll study when I'm in the right mood." The problem is not that these thoughts are unreasonable. The problem is that the right mood rarely arrives on schedule. Days become weeks, weeks become months, and life quietly waits while they wait for motivation. Discipline works differently. Discipline does not ask how you feel, it asks what you decided. That simple difference changes everything. When you stop letting emotions decide your actions begin shaping your emotions instead. The promise becomes more important than the mood. Whether you feel excited, tired, confident, or discouraged, the commitment remains the same. This is why so many people discover something surprising once they finally begin a task. Before starting, they feel lazy and unmotivated. 5 minutes later, they are focused. The hardest part was never doing the work. It was taking the first step. Action has a quiet way of creating the motivation people spend so much time waiting for. Think about the last time you postponed an important task. You probably spent more energy thinking about it than actually doing it. The longer you waited, the heavier it felt. Yet once you finally started, the task often became easier than you had imagined. Progress replaced resistance. This pattern appears in almost every area of life. A student named Maya dreamed of becoming a doctor. She loved learning, but there were many evenings when the last thing she wanted to do was open another textbook. After long days of classes and responsibilities, her motivation disappeared. Some of her friends only studied when they felt inspired, convinced they learned better that way. Maya chose a different approach. She made herself one simple promise. Every evening, no matter how she felt, she would study for at least 30 minutes. She did not promise to study for hours. She did not expect herself to enjoy every lesson. She only promised to begin. Some evenings she finished after exactly 30 minutes because she was exhausted. Other nights, once she had started, she studied for 2 hours without noticing the time. The important part was never the length of the study session. It was that she kept showing up. Months passed, and the results became impossible to ignore. While others repeatedly stopped and restarted, Maya continued moving forward. Her knowledge grew steadily, her confidence increased, and her preparation became stronger. She did not succeed because she felt motivated every day. She succeeded because she refused to let temporary feelings decide permanent goals. That lesson reaches far beyond school. Artists create even when inspiration feels distant. Athletes train on mornings when their bodies feel heavy. Business owners solve difficult problems despite uncertainty. Parents continue caring for their families even when they are exhausted. The people we admire are not people who never lose motivation. They are people who keep their promises after motivation disappears. This is one of the greatest shifts you can make in your thinking. Instead of asking yourself, "Do I feel like doing this today?" ask a different question. What promise did I make, and will I keep it? That question removes emotions from the driver's seat. It reminds you that your commitment was made by the person you wanted to become, not by the feelings you happen to have today. Some days the answer will require effort. Some days it will require patience. But every time you choose your promise over your mood, you strengthen the trust you have in yourself. The goal is not to eliminate emotions. There is nothing wrong with feeling tired, discouraged, or uninspired. The goal is to stop allowing those feelings to decide whether your promises matter. Your emotions are temporary. Your character is built by the choices you make despite them. There will always be mornings when motivation is nowhere to be found. There will be evenings when giving up seems easier than continuing. Those moments do not determine who you are. Your next decision does. Motivation will continue to come and go throughout your life. Welcome it when it arrives, but never depend on it. It is a visitor that cannot be trusted to stay. Discipline, however, remains beside you long after excitement fades. It quietly reminds you of the promise you made and gives you another chance to keep it. Your future will never be decided by the feelings you wait for. It will always be shaped by the promises you choose to keep, especially on the days you least feel like keeping them. Chapter 5. Become someone you can trust. The longest relationship you will ever have is not with a friend, a partner, a parent, or a co-worker. It is the relationship you have with yourself. Every single day, you listen to your own thoughts, make promises to yourself, and decide whether those promises deserve to be believed. The real question is not whether you trust other people. It is whether you trust your own word. Trust is never created by a single moment. It grows quietly through consistency. You trust a friend who always arrives when they say they will. You rely on a co-worker who finishes what they promise. You feel safe with people whose actions repeatedly match their words. No one earns trust through good intentions alone. They earn it by showing up again and again. The same truth exists inside you. Every promise you keep tells your mind, "You can count on me." Every promise you break whispers something different. It says, "Maybe next time. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe my words don't really matter." At first, those whispers are easy to ignore, but over time, they become the voice that shapes how you see yourself. This is why some people hesitate before starting something new. They are not afraid of the goal itself. They are afraid of disappointing themselves again. Deep down, they have collected so many broken promises that they no longer expect a different outcome. They begin with doubt because doubt has become familiar. That hidden lack of trust changes more than ambition. It affects the way you make decisions. It causes you to lower your expectations because believing feels risky. It convinces you to quit early because experience tells you that you probably won't finish anyway. Opportunities appear, but instead of feeling excited, you quietly wonder whether you are capable of following through. The painful part is that none of this has anything to do with intelligence, talent, or potential. Many capable people live far below their abilities simply because they no longer believe themselves. Sarah understood that feeling better than anyone around her realized. For years, she carried notebooks filled with goals. She wanted to exercise regularly, improve her finances, learn another language, and become more confident. Every new month brought fresh determination. Every month ended the same way, with unfinished plans and another notebook left behind. After enough disappointments, she stopped writing goals altogether. When friends encouraged her to try again, she smiled politely, but inside she had already decided it would not work. She wasn't lazy, she wasn't incapable. She had simply stopped believing her own promises. One evening she made a decision that felt almost insignificant. She promised herself that every night before bed she would spend 5 minutes writing about her day in a journal. 5 minutes, nothing more. The first week passed without much excitement. The second week felt easier. A month later, she realized something had changed. She no longer thought about whether she would write. She simply did it because that was the promise she'd made. The journal itself became less important than what it represented. For the first time in years, she had evidence that her words could be trusted. That small promise slowly influenced everything else. She became willing to make another commitment because she finally believed she could keep it. Confidence did not arrive like a sudden wave. It appeared quietly, built from dozens of ordinary evenings when her actions matched her intentions. This is how real confidence is created. Many people spend years trying to think positively about themselves. They repeat encouraging words, search for motivation, and hope confidence will somehow appear. Positive thinking has value, but it cannot replace proof. Your mind believes what your actions repeatedly demonstrate. If every promise ends in disappointment, your confidence has no foundation. If your actions consistently support your words, confidence grows almost without effort. Discipline is often misunderstood as forcing yourself to work harder or becoming tougher than everyone else. In reality, discipline is much more personal than that. It is the quiet practice of becoming someone who follows through. It is choosing to make promises carefully because you respect them enough to keep them. This is also why small promises matter so much. Keeping one simple promise every day does more than complete a task. It repairs a relationship. It rebuilds the trust that may have been weakened by years of good intentions without consistent action. Every fulfilled promise becomes another reason to believe that tomorrow does not have to repeat yesterday. You do not have to convince yourself that you are capable. You have to show yourself. Every promise you honor becomes another piece of evidence that you're dependable. Every action that matches your intention strengthens the bond between who you are today and who you want to become. One day, you will notice something remarkable. You will stop making promises just to feel hopeful. You will make them because you know they will be kept. That is the kind of confidence no setback can easily destroy. Every kept promise quietly says, "You can trust me." Those words may never be spoken aloud, but your mind hears them every time your actions match your intentions. And the strongest, most valuable relationship you will ever build is not with the world around you. It is with the person who has been listening to your promises all along, yourself. Chapter 6. Tiny wins change big lives. The biggest changes in life rarely announce themselves. They happen so quietly that while they are taking place, they almost seem invisible. One day looks very much like the one before it. The effort feels ordinary. The results seem small. Then, months later, you look back and realize you are no longer the same person. The transformation did not happen overnight. It happened one unnoticed day at a time. This is where many people lose patience. They expect today's effort to produce tomorrow's reward. They read a few pages and wonder why they do not feel wiser. They exercise for a week and expect to see a different body. They save a little money and question whether such a small amount could ever make a difference. Because the results are invisible, they assume the effort is meaningless. But life rarely works that way. The value of a small action is not measured by what it changes today. It is measured by what it continues changing after being repeated hundreds of times. Think about reading just 5 pages every day. 5 pages hardly seem impressive. You can finish them in a few minutes. On a single day, they may not appear to change your thinking at all. Yet after months of keeping that promise, you have finished several books. You have learned new ideas, challenged old beliefs, and developed a habit that once seemed impossible. The same is true for almost everything worthwhile. A 20-minute walk may not transform your health today. Practicing a skill for 15 minutes may not make you an expert this week. Saving a small amount of money may not change your financial future by next month. But these actions have something powerful in common. They continue working long after the moment has passed. Small promises have a way of building on one another. One good decision makes the next one a little easier. One healthy meal encourages another. One writing session leads to another page. One day of keeping your promise becomes 2, then 10, then 100. Eventually, what once required effort becomes part of who you are. This is the quiet power of growth. It compounds. You do not need complicated formulas to understand this idea. Picture a single drop of water falling onto a stone. 1 drop changes nothing. 10 drops still seem harmless. Thousands of drops falling day after day slowly shape the surface of the rock. The stone does not change because of one dramatic moment. It changes because small actions never stopped. The opposite is also true. One unhealthy meal does not damage your health. One day of wasting time doesn't ruin your future. One broken promise may not seem important, but repeated often enough, small mistakes also begin to shape your life. The future is built just as much by the little things you ignore as by the little things you repeat. That is why today's promise matters more than it appears. There is a story about a bamboo tree that surprises many people. After the seed is planted, almost nothing visible happens for years. The person caring for it continues watering the soil day after day, with little evidence that anything is growing. It would be easy to believe the effort is being wasted, but beneath the surface, something important is happening. The roots are spreading deeper and stronger, preparing for the growth that will eventually follow. Then, when the time is right, the bamboo begins rising rapidly. To someone who only sees the final result, the growth appears sudden. In reality, it was built by years of patient care that no one could see. Your own progress often works the same way. The promises you keep today are creating roots beneath the surface. You may not notice greater confidence after one morning walk or one evening spent reading instead of scrolling through your phone. You may not feel more disciplined after keeping a single promise. But every time you honor your commitment, you strengthen something invisible within yourself. One day, those invisible changes become visible. People may tell you that you seem more confident, calmer, healthier, or more focused. They will notice the growth, but they will not see the hundreds of ordinary decisions that made it possible. They will see the bamboo, not the years of watering. This is why comparing your progress with someone else's can be so discouraging. You are comparing visible results while ignoring invisible effort. Every person is building a different foundation. Your responsibility is not to match someone else's timeline. It is to protect your own promise today. Do not judge yourself by how much your life has changed this week. Judge yourself by whether you kept your word today. That single question shifts your attention away from immediate rewards and toward lasting character. It reminds you that success is not something you chase. It is something you quietly build. Patience becomes much easier when you understand that progress is often invisible before it becomes undeniable. Every small promise you keep is another brick laid with care. One brick seems ordinary. 100 bricks begin to form a wall. 1,000 bricks become a home strong enough to last for years. An extraordinary life is never built in one dramatic moment. It's built through countless tiny victories that no one applauds and few people notice. Keep laying your bricks. Keep honoring today's promise. One day, you will stand on a foundation so strong that it will seem impossible to remember the person who once doubted whether small actions could ever make a big difference. Chapter 7. Design a life that makes discipline easy. Every place you spend time is quietly teaching you how to behave. A room can invite focus or distraction. A desk can encourage meaningful work or endless procrastination. Even before you make a conscious decision, your surroundings are already influencing the next choice you are about to make. That influence is stronger than many people realize. When someone says, "I just don't have enough discipline," they often believe the problem is inside them. They blame their personality, their lack of motivation, or their weak willpower. But sometimes the real problem is much simpler. They are trying to keep good promises in an environment that constantly encourages bad ones. Think about what happens when your phone is the first thing you see every morning. Before your feet even touch the floor, notifications are waiting for your attention. A quick glance turns into 20 minutes of scrolling. The peaceful morning you hope to create disappears before the day has truly begun. Now picture something different. Instead of your phone, the first thing you notice is a book resting beside your bed. A notebook waits with a pen already open to a blank page. A glass of water reminds you of the promise you made the night before. Nothing about these objects forces you to act, but they gently guide you toward the person you are trying to become. The same principle appears throughout everyday life. Workout clothes folded beside the bed remove one excuse for skipping exercise. Healthy food placed where it is easy to see makes better choices feel natural. A clean workspace invites concentration. A calendar placed where you cannot ignore it quietly reminds you of your commitments. Every small adjustment reduces the effort required to keep your promises. This matters because every unnecessary obstacle increases the chance of giving up. If your running shoes are buried in the back of a closet, exercising becomes a bigger task than it needs to be. If your desk is covered with clutter, beginning important work feels harder. If every moment of boredom leads to reaching for your phone, distraction slowly becomes your default habit. People often believe they need stronger self-control when what they actually need is fewer obstacles. Willpower is valuable, but it is limited. Every difficult decision asks something from your mind. The more choices you must fight throughout the day, the more tired that mental strength becomes. By evening, even simple promises can feel difficult. That is why designing your environment is so powerful. A teacher named Rahim struggled with writing for years. He dreamed of completing a book, yet every evening he came home exhausted. He sat on the couch, just for a few minutes, turned on the television, checked his phone, and promised himself he would write tomorrow instead. Tomorrow rarely came. For a long time, he believed he simply lacked discipline. Then he made a few surprisingly small changes. He moved the television remote into a drawer instead of leaving it on the table. He placed his notebook and laptop on a clean desk before leaving for work each morning. He kept his phone in another room during his writing time. Most importantly, he promised himself that he would sit at his desk for 15 minutes every evening, whether he felt inspired or not. Nothing dramatic happened overnight, but something became noticeably easier. When he walked into the room after work, the path toward writing was now simpler than the path toward distraction. The notebook was already waiting. The desk was inviting. There were fewer decisions to make and fewer temptations to overcome. Weeks later, writing had become part of his routine. Not because he had discovered extraordinary willpower, but because he had removed many of the obstacles that had quietly been working against him. This is why systems are more dependable than motivation. Motivation asks, "Do I feel like doing this today?" A good system answers that question before it is even asked. When your environment supports your promises, good decisions become more automatic. You spend less time negotiating with yourself and more time simply taking action. Discipline begins to feel lighter because your surroundings are working with you instead of against you. This does not mean life becomes effortless. There will still be busy days, unexpected problems, and moments when you are tempted to choose comfort over commitment. But every improvement you make to your environment increases the likelihood that you will stay true to your promise. Small advantages repeated every day create remarkable results over time. The goal is not to create a perfect routine. The goal is to create a life where the next right choice is easier than the next wrong one. Every object in your home, every corner of your workspace, and every routine you repeat is quietly influencing your future. Some are pulling you toward the life you want. Others are pulling you away from it. The good news is that you have the power to redesign that influence, one small change at a time. Your environment is having a conversation with you every day. Make sure it is speaking the language of the person you want to become. Build surroundings that make your promises easier to keep than to break. That is not making life easier in a careless way. It is making discipline practical, sustainable, and strong enough to last for years. Chapter 8. The Battle Between Today and Tomorrow. Tomorrow has become the busiest day in the world. It is the day diets begin, books get written, businesses finally launch, savings accounts start growing, and dreams come alive. Every day, millions of promises are quietly packed into tomorrow, as though it has endless time and endless energy. Yet tomorrow never carries them. When it finally arrives, it simply becomes another version of today, waiting for the same decision that was postponed yesterday. This is the quiet trap of procrastination. It rarely sounds like giving up. Instead, it sounds responsible. I'll start after the weekend. I'll begin when work calms down. I'll wait until I have more energy. Those words feel hopeful because they protect us from the discomfort of acting now. We convince ourselves that the goal still matters simply because we have not abandoned it. But a promise delayed often becomes a promise forgotten. The hardest part is that procrastination does not usually look dangerous. It arrives disguised as patience, preparation, or waiting for the perfect opportunity. It tells us that tomorrow will somehow offer more time, more motivation, or better circumstances. Yet tomorrow brings the same 24 hours, the same responsibilities, and often the same excuses. Nothing changes because nothing has required us to change. Human nature naturally leans toward comfort. The comfortable choice asks very little from us. It offers immediate relief and asks us to postpone effort for another day. Progress asks for something different. It asks us to accept a little discomfort now in exchange for a better future later. That trade can feel unfair in the moment because comfort gives an instant reward, while meaningful progress often stays invisible for weeks or months. This quiet battle appears in ordinary moments. The alarm rings and staying in bed feels easier than getting up. A workout is planned, but the couch feels more inviting. A book waits to be opened, but endless scrolling demands less effort. A difficult conversation needs to happen, but silence feels safer. None of these decisions seem life-changing by themselves. Yet life is rarely shaped by one decision. It is shaped by the direction of thousands of small choices. That is why procrastination is so powerful. It does not destroy dreams in a single moment. It slowly teaches us that postponing is normal. One skipped workout becomes several. One missed writing session becomes another unfinished project. One day without studying becomes weeks of poor preparation. A dream that was supposed to begin this month quietly reaches another birthday without taking its first real step. Years can disappear this way. A man named Imran knew exactly what that felt like. For years he wanted to learn graphic design. He believed it could open new career opportunities and allow him to build a more creative life. He bought online courses, watched inspiring videos, and filled notebooks with plans. Every new year felt like a fresh beginning, yet every evening ended the same way. After work, he felt tired. He promised himself he would start on Saturday. Saturday became next month. Next month became next year. His dream stayed alive in his imagination, but it never became part of his daily life. One afternoon, while cleaning a drawer, he found an old notebook. Inside were goals he had written nearly 4 years earlier. The words were almost identical to the goals he was still writing today. Reading them felt like looking at someone trapped in the same place, repeating the same promises without moving forward. That moment changed something. He stopped asking himself when he would finally have enough time. Instead, he asked a much simpler question: what can I honestly do today? The answer was not an hour of study. It was 15 minutes. 15 minutes felt too small to postpone. He opened his laptop and completed one lesson. The next day, he kept the same promise. Some evenings he stopped after exactly 15 minutes. Other evenings he continued because beginning had created its own momentum. Within months, those small sessions turned into real skills. Before long, he accepted his first freelance project, not because life had become easier, but because he had finally stopped asking tomorrow to carry the work that belonged to today. That is how momentum is created. People often believe momentum comes after remarkable progress. In reality, momentum appears much earlier. It begins the moment you take the first imperfect step. Action creates energy. Movement creates confidence. Progress creates more progress. Waiting does the opposite. Every day spent preparing without acting makes beginning feel even harder. Perfection is one of procrastination's favorite disguises. It whispers that you should wait until you have more knowledge, more confidence, better equipment, or ideal circumstances. But almost no meaningful achievement begins under perfect conditions. Writers begin with imperfect pages. Athletes begin with imperfect performances. Entrepreneurs begin with imperfect ideas. They improve because they start, not because they wait. Every promise you make belongs to a specific day, When you delay it without reason, you quietly teach yourself that your commitments are optional. When you honor it, even imperfectly, you send a completely different message. You prove that your future deserves today's effort instead of tomorrow's hope. There will always be another excuse waiting for you. There will always be another reason to believe that tomorrow will somehow be easier. But tomorrow has carried enough unfinished dreams already. It does not need another promise that should have been kept today. The life you want is not waiting for a perfect moment. It is waiting for your next decision. Honor today's promise while it still belongs to today. One small action taken now will always be more powerful than the most perfect plan postponed until tomorrow. Chapter 9. The days you don't feel like it. The promises that shape your life are rarely tested on your best days. They are tested on the mornings when you wake up tired, the evenings when work has drained every ounce of energy, and the moments when disappointment quietly tells you that missing one day will not matter. Anyone can stay committed when life feels easy. The real value of discipline appears when keeping your promise becomes the last thing you feel like doing. This is why difficult days deserve more respect than easy ones. On a good day, waking up early feels possible. Exercising feels exciting. Reading a few pages feels enjoyable. It is easy to believe you are becoming a disciplined person when everything seems to work in your favor. But life is never made up entirely of good days. There will always be stress, unexpected problems, bad news, sleepless nights, and moments when even simple tasks feel heavier than usual. Those days are not signs that something has gone wrong. They are simply part of being human. Your emotions were never meant to remain the same from one day to the next. Some mornings you will feel confident. Other mornings you will question yourself. There will be days filled with energy and days when every step feels slow. You will experience excitement, frustration, hope, fear, joy, disappointment, and boredom. None of these emotions are permanent, and none of them should decide whether your promises matter. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing that difficult emotions are a reason to stop moving forward. They tell themselves that they will return to their routine once they feel better, less stressed, or more motivated. But if your commitment depends on perfect emotions, your commitment will disappear every time life becomes difficult. Discipline asks a different question. It does not ask, "How do I feel today?" It asks, "What kind of person do I want to be today?" That small shift changes everything. When your identity becomes more important than your mood, your actions begin to reflect your values instead of your emotions. You stop chasing the feeling of motivation and start honoring the promises that define your character. This does not mean pretending that hard days do not exist. It means refusing to let them write the ending of your story. A working mother named Layla learned this lesson during one of the hardest seasons of her life. Between caring for her two young children, managing a full-time job, and supporting an ill parent, every day felt like a race she could barely finish. By the time evening arrived, she had almost nothing left to give. Before that season, she had promised herself that she would read every night before bed. Reading had become her way of learning, growing, and creating a little space for herself. As life became more demanding, she considered giving up the habit completely. After all, she was exhausted, and nobody would blame her. Instead, she made a different decision. She lowered the size of the promise, but refused to break it. On the hardest nights, she read just one page. Some evenings, she barely kept her eyes open long enough to finish it. Other nights, that single page turned into 10, because once she had started, continuing felt easier than she expected. Months later, Layla realized something remarkable. She had not simply maintained a reading habit. She had protected her relationship with herself. Every difficult evening when she chose to keep even the smallest version of her promise reminded her that she was still someone who followed through. Her confidence did not grow because life became easier. It grew because she remained dependable when life became harder. That is an important distinction. Many people think discipline means pushing yourself to perform at your highest level every single day. They imagine that disciplined people never slow down, never struggle, and never adjust their expectations. Real discipline is much wiser than that. There will be days when you can give 100%. There will also be days when 100% is impossible. On those days, keeping the smallest version of your promise is often enough. If your promise is to exercise, perhaps today that means taking a short walk instead of completing an intense workout. If your promise is to write, perhaps today it means one paragraph instead of several pages. If your promise is to read, perhaps today it means one page instead of an entire chapter. The size of the action is not what protects your progress. The decision to keep your word does. Every time you choose consistency over perfection, you strengthen your self-trust. You remind yourself that difficult emotions are temporary, but your character is built one decision at a time. You refuse to let one exhausting day become the beginning of another long period of broken promises. There is a quiet strength that develops when you continue moving forward despite discomfort. It cannot be borrowed from motivational speeches or created by positive thinking alone. It comes from seeing yourself honor your commitments when no one else is watching and when every excuse would have sounded reasonable. Those moments shape you far more than easy victories ever could. Never believe that difficult days are interruptions to your journey. They are the journey. They are the moments when discipline stops being an idea and becomes part of who you are. Every promise you keep on a challenging day tells your future self, "You can rely on me, even when life is difficult." Tomorrow may not be easier. You may wake up tired, discouraged, or overwhelmed. But remember this: your feelings do not have the final word. Your next decision does. Keep your promise, however small it needs to be, and let every difficult day become another reason to trust the person you are becoming. Chapter 10. The 365-Day Rule. A week often feels like enough time to change everything. A year often feels too long to even think about. That is why so many people become discouraged. They expect dramatic results after a few days of effort, then lose hope when life still looks the same. Yet the greatest transformations almost never happen in a week. They happen so quietly over a year that by the time they become visible, they seem almost unbelievable. Real change has a strange habit of hiding while it is taking place. You keep your promise today, and nothing seems different. You keep it again tomorrow, and life still feels familiar. Another week passes. Another month follows. The mirror looks the same. Your routine feels ordinary. It becomes easy to wonder whether your effort is making any difference at all. But beneath those ordinary days, something important is happening. Each promise you keep is strengthening a habit. Every habit is shaping your character. Every choice is teaching your mind what kind of person you are becoming. You may not notice the changes from one day to the next, but your future is quietly being built by them. This is why the next 365 days matter so much. One day rarely changes a life. 365 days often do. Think about learning a new language. Memorizing a few words today may seem almost meaningless. You still cannot hold a conversation. You still make mistakes. It is tempting to believe you are making no progress. Yet those few words become dozens, dozens become hundreds. Before long you understand conversations that once sounded impossible. The same pattern appears in every meaningful area of life. Walking for 20 minutes today may not transform your health. Saving a small amount of money this week may not change your financial situation. Spending a few extra minutes listening carefully to someone you love may not instantly strengthen your relationship. But repeat those actions for an entire year, and the story becomes completely different. Your body becomes stronger because movement becomes normal. Your savings grow because small amounts were never ignored. Your relationships deepen because trust was built through consistent attention instead of occasional grand gestures. Your skills improve because practice quietly replaced wishful thinking. Small actions never stay small when they are repeated long enough. This is the hidden power of consistency. It allows ordinary choices to create extraordinary results. A young teacher named Hassan discovered this without realizing it at first. He wanted to become a confident public speaker, but every presentation filled him with anxiety. He admired people who spoke naturally and assumed that he simply Instead of searching for confidence, he made one promise. Every single day he would practice speaking aloud for 10 minutes. Some days he stood in front of a mirror. Other days he recorded himself on his phone. Occasionally he practiced while walking through his living room. The sessions were far from perfect, and for the first few months they felt almost pointless. Nothing dramatic happened. He still stumbled over words. He still felt nervous. There were evenings when he wondered if 10 minutes could possibly matter, but he kept his promise anyway. Half a year later, speaking no longer felt as frightening. He noticed that organizing his thoughts had become easier. He spoke with more confidence during meetings. Friends commented that he sounded calmer and more natural. By the end of the year, the difference surprised even him. He accepted invitations to give presentations that he would once have avoided. His career opened new doors because he was finally willing to speak in front of others. Looking back, it was difficult to identify the exact day everything changed. There wasn't one. There were simply hundreds of ordinary days when he chose to keep one ordinary promise. That is how transformation usually happens. It doesn't arrive with loud announcements or dramatic breakthroughs. It grows quietly while you are busy honoring today's commitment. This is why measuring success by immediate results can be so discouraging. If you judge yourself only by what has changed this week, you may overlook the progress that is quietly preparing next year. But if you ask a different question, did I keep today's promise? You begin measuring the one thing completely within your control. That question changes your focus. Instead of chasing visible success, you begin building lasting character. Instead of worrying about the finish line, you become faithful to the next step. Something remarkable happens when you live this way. Your identity changes long before your circumstances do. You stop introducing yourself as someone who is trying to become healthier, more confident, more focused, or more disciplined. You simply become that person, one promise at a time. The outside world eventually notices what has been growing inside you for months. New opportunities appear because your habits have changed. Your confidence feels stronger because your actions have repeatedly matched your words. The life you once imagined slowly becomes the life you are actually living. None of it happened because of one extraordinary day. It happened because ordinary days were no longer wasted. If you keep one meaningful promise every day for the next 365 days, the person standing in the mirror a year from now will not be transformed by luck, talent, or perfect circumstances. They will be transformed by hundreds of quiet decisions that no one applauded and few people noticed. One promise, one day, repeated 365 times. That is how extraordinary lives are built, not through one remarkable decision, but through the courage to make an ordinary one, every single day. Chapter 11. How one promise changes everything. A single decision rarely stays where it begins. One choice quietly introduces another, and before long, an entire day begins moving in a different direction. The promise you keep at 7 o'clock in the morning can influence the conversation you have at noon, the decision you make in the afternoon, and the way you end your evening. Discipline has a remarkable quality. It spreads. It refuses to remain confined to one small corner of your life. That is why keeping one promise is never just about the promise itself. If you wake up when you said you would, you begin the day with evidence that your words matter. That feeling follows you. You become a little more willing to make another good choice because you've already proven something important to yourself. The person who honored one commitment is more likely to honor the next one. This is how discipline creates momentum, not by forcing perfection, but by changing expectations. Every kept promise quietly raises the standard you have for yourself. You stop asking, "Can I do this?" and begin asking, "Why wouldn't I?" Confidence no longer feels like something you hope to find. It becomes the natural result of repeatedly keeping your word. At first, the changes seem unrelated. You promise yourself that you will take a 20-minute walk every evening. A few weeks later, you notice that you are sleeping better. Because you feel more rested, you find it easier to focus at work. Better focus helps you finish important tasks on time, reducing stress. With less stress, you become more patient with your family. That improved patience strengthens your relationships. None of these changes were part of the original promise, yet they all grew from it. One disciplined action often becomes the beginning of many others. The same thing happens with money. Perhaps your daily promise is to spend 5 minutes reviewing your expenses before bed. At first, it feels like a small habit with little impact, but over time, you begin noticing unnecessary purchases. Saving becomes easier because you're paying attention. Financial stress slowly decreases, giving you greater peace of mind. That peace allows you to make calmer decisions instead of emotional ones. The promise was only 5 minutes. The benefits reached far beyond your finances. Learning works the same way. Reading a few pages each day may seem insignificant, but every book introduces new ideas. Those ideas influence the questions you ask, the problems you solve, and the opportunities you recognize. A habit that began with 5 quiet pages before bed slowly changes the way you think, communicate, and approach your work. Even emotional well-being is shaped by these small acts of consistency. When you repeatedly keep your promises, you spend less energy feeling guilty about what you failed to do. Instead of carrying the weight of broken commitments, you carry the quiet confidence that comes from following through. Your mind becomes calmer because it no longer has to argue with itself every day. Omar experienced this without expecting it. His original promise had nothing to do with changing his entire life. He simply decided that every morning he would spend 15 minutes walking before work. That was all. The walks were not fast. They were not impressive. Some mornings he barely felt awake, but he kept showing up because he had promised himself that he would. After several months, he noticed he had more energy throughout the day. Because he felt healthier, he became more productive at work. Greater productivity earned the trust of his manager, who began giving him more responsibility. The confidence he gained at work encouraged him to enroll in evening classes he had postponed for years. As he became more organized, he also became more present at home. His family noticed that he listened more carefully and seemed less distracted. Looking back, it was difficult to identify where the transformation had truly begun. It was not the promotion, it was not the classes, it was not even the improved health. It had begun with a simple promise to take one walk every morning. That is the nature of discipline. It creates ripples you cannot predict. When you throw a stone into still water, the first circle is small, but the movement does not stop there. The ripples continue expanding long after the stone has disappeared beneath the surface. Your daily promises work in much the same way. Their influence extends far beyond the moment in which they are made. This is why you do not need to control every part of your life at once. Trying to fix everything often leads to frustration because your attention becomes scattered. But when you focus on one meaningful promise, you give yourself something solid to build upon. That single habit becomes a dependable foundation from which healthier choices naturally grow. You begin to trust yourself more. You make better decisions because you expect more from yourself. You notice opportunities because your mind has become more disciplined. You strengthen relationships because you become someone others can rely on. You grow not because you forced every area of your life to improve, but because one reliable habit quietly influenced all the others. The promise may be small, but its reach is extraordinary. Every promise you keep today creates possibilities that are still invisible. It opens doors you cannot yet see, strengthens qualities you cannot yet measure, and prepares you for opportunities that have not yet arrived. One disciplined decision has the power to shape an entire lifetime, often in ways that only become clear when you look back and realize that everything changed the day you finally began keeping your word. Chapter 12. The New Person in the Mirror. One day, without realizing exactly when it happened, you stop chasing the person you hope to become. You wake up and notice that the struggle feels different. The habits that once demanded endless effort now feel familiar. The promises that once seemed impossible to keep have quietly become part of your daily life. You are no longer trying to become someone else. You have slowly become that person. That moment rarely arrives with celebration. There is no dramatic breakthrough, no perfect morning, no unforgettable speech. It often appears in an ordinary moment, a day that feels almost like every other day. Yet something inside you has changed forever. You notice it when the alarm rings and you get out of bed without negotiating with yourself. You notice it when you open a book instead of reaching for your phone. You notice it when you finish the work you promised yourself you would complete. These actions no longer feel like battles because they are no longer arguments between who you are and who you want to be. They have become part of your identity. This is the reward that so many people overlook. They begin a journey hoping for a better job, better health, more money, or greater success. Those goals are meaningful, and many of them may come. But somewhere along the way, something even more valuable begins to grow. You become someone you respect. That kind of change cannot be measured by a paycheck or a number on a scale. It appears in the quiet confidence you carry into difficult conversations. It shows itself in the patience you have with people you love. It reveals itself in the calm decisions you make under pressure. It becomes visible in the way you respond to setbacks instead of being controlled by them. These qualities do not arrive all at once. They are built one promise at a time. Every morning you choose your commitment over your comfort. You strengthen your character. Every evening you keep your word despite feeling tired. You become a little more dependable. Every ordinary decision quietly teaches your mind who you are. Over time, those lessons become beliefs. You stop saying, "I'm trying to become disciplined." You begin saying, "This is simply how I live." That is the moment identity has changed. Years ago, Amina believed she lacked discipline completely. She admired people who exercised regularly, stayed organized, and followed through on their goals. They seemed different from her. She assumed they had more willpower, better habits, or stronger personalities. Whenever she tried to change, she lasted only a few days before returning to old patterns. Each failure convinced her that discipline belonged to other people. Then she stopped trying to change everything. She made one promise. Every morning she would spend 10 minutes walking before beginning her day. The promise felt almost too small to matter, but she kept it. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Eventually, walking no longer required determination because it had become normal. That small success encouraged another promise. She began reading a few pages each evening. Later, she started planning the next day's priorities before going to bed. None of these habits appeared overnight. Neither did the person she was becoming. One afternoon, while talking with a friend, Amina gave advice about staying consistent. Halfway through the conversation, she paused and smiled. She realized she was describing herself. The woman who once believed discipline was impossible had quietly become someone others looked to for encouragement. Nothing magical had happened. She had simply cast hundreds of small votes for the person she wanted to become. That is how identity is built. Not by what you hope, not by what you promise, but by what you repeatedly do. Every promise you keep is a vote. One vote may seem insignificant. 10 votes may still feel too few to matter. But after hundreds of honest decisions, the result becomes impossible to ignore. You no longer need to convince yourself that you are disciplined because your actions have already answered the question. This is why lasting change feels so different from temporary motivation. Motivation asks you to believe in a future version of yourself. Discipline quietly creates that future version until one day there is no difference between the person you imagined and the person you have become. The greatest victories often happen where no one else can see them. They happen in the conversations you no longer have with yourself because the decision has already been made. They happen in the confidence that comes from knowing you can trust your own word. They happen in the peace of no longer carrying the weight of broken promises. Perhaps the most beautiful part of this journey is that it never asks you to become perfect. It only asks you to keep becoming a little more honest, a little more dependable, and a little more faithful to your own commitments. That quiet progress is enough. When you look in the mirror after months of honoring your promises, you may notice the same face looking back at you. But you will not see the same person. You will see someone who has learned to choose commitment over comfort, action over excuses, and consistency over temporary emotion. That is the greatest reward discipline can ever offer. It does not simply change your habits. It changes your character. It changes your standards. It changes the story you tell yourself about who you are. And one day you will look into the mirror with something that no achievement alone can ever give you. A deep and quiet sense of pride, knowing that the person looking back is someone you genuinely admire. Chapter 13. The Legacy of Small Decisions. Very few people remember the promises you made. They remember the promises you kept. Long after your words have faded, your actions remain in the minds of the people who watched you live. They remember whether you were dependable, whether you followed through, and whether your actions matched your values. Without realizing it, every ordinary decision you make becomes part of the story that others will one day tell about you. This is why discipline is never a private achievement. It may begin as a promise you make to yourself, but it rarely ends there. The way you live quietly shapes the expectations, habits, and beliefs of the people around you. Your daily choices become examples that others notice, even when you think no one is paying attention. Children understand this better than anyone. They listen to what their parents say, but they learn even more from what their parents repeatedly do. A child who watches a parent keep small promises begins to believe that keeping promises is simply part of life. They see someone who wakes up when they plan to, finishes what they started, treats people with respect, and accepts responsibility instead of making excuses. Those ordinary moments become lessons that no speech could ever teach. The same thing happens in every relationship. Friends learn who they can rely on because consistency builds trust over time. Co-workers quickly notice the person who always delivers what they promised. Teams become stronger when one dependable person quietly raises the standard for everyone else. Communities naturally respect people whose words and actions always seem to belong together. What makes the influence so powerful is that it does not demand attention. It does not need applause. It does not require impressive titles or public recognition. It grows quietly through everyday behavior. There is a difference between telling people how to live and showing them how to live. Advice can be forgotten by the end of the day. An example stays in someone's mind for years. People are inspired less by what they hear than by what they repeatedly see. Think about the people who have influenced your own life. Perhaps it was not someone who gave the longest speeches or offered the most inspiring advice. Perhaps it was someone who simply showed up every day, stayed true to their word, and remained dependable even when life became difficult. Their consistency spoke more loudly than any motivational message ever could. A teacher named Mr. Rahman understood this without trying to become anyone's role model. Every morning, he arrived at school before anyone else. His classroom was always prepared. His lessons were carefully planned. He greeted every student with patience, whether he was having a good day or a difficult one. Year after year, he repeated these ordinary actions without expecting praise. One of his students, Arif, struggled with confidence. He often started projects with excitement, but rarely finished them. He admired successful people, but believed they possessed something he did not. As the years passed, Arif noticed something about his teacher. Mr. Rahman never talked much about discipline. He simply lived it. Watching that quiet consistency changed the way Arif thought about success. He realized that discipline was not a special talent reserved for extraordinary people. It was a decision repeated often enough to become a way of life. Years later, Arif became a teacher himself. When people complimented his reliability and dedication, he smiled because he knew where those habits had begun. They were not the result of one powerful conversation. They were the result of watching someone quietly keep their promises every single day. That is how discipline spreads. Not through pressure, not through perfection, but through example. The influence of your life reaches farther than you may ever know. Someone is always learning from the way you respond to setbacks, honor commitments, and carry yourself through ordinary days. They may never tell you, you may never realize it, yet your consistency can give another person permission to believe that lasting change is possible. This means your daily promises carry more weight than you think. When you choose to keep your word, you are not only strengthening your own character, you are showing the people around you what integrity looks like. You are proving that consistency is possible in a world that often celebrates quick results instead of steady effort. Your legacy is not created in a single remarkable moment. It is written through hundreds of ordinary decisions that seem too small to matter. It is written when you choose honesty instead of excuses. It is written when you finish what you started. It is written when you keep your word, even when no one is watching. One day, people may forget the goals you achieved or the titles you earned. They may not remember every success you celebrated or every challenge you overcame, but they will remember how you lived. They will remember whether you were someone whose actions could be trusted. That is a legacy worth building. Every promise you keep today becomes part of a story that will continue long after today's tasks have been forgotten. Your consistency plants seeds of courage, responsibility, and hope in the lives of others. Some of those seeds will grow in ways you may never witness. So keep your promises, not only because they change your future, but also because they quietly shape the future of everyone who is watching. Build a legacy defined by integrity, consistency, and trust. In the end, the greatest gift you leave behind will not be your words. It will be the example of a life that proved promises are meant to be kept. Chapter 14. Tomorrow begins with today's promise. Life has a quiet way of moving faster than we expect. Days become weeks, weeks become months, and before long, another year has passed. Looking back, it is easy to wonder where the time went. Yet time is rarely the thing we lose. What we lose are the ordinary days we believed would always be waiting for us. We tell ourselves that change can begin tomorrow, next month, or after life becomes less busy. But while we are waiting for the perfect moment, life keeps moving without asking whether we are ready. Every meaningful future begins the same way. It begins with an ordinary day that someone decides to treat differently. Not a perfect day, not an easy day, just a day when one promise is made and, more importantly, kept. If this book has offered you anything, I hope it has offered you a new way of looking at yourself. Perhaps you once believed that discipline belonged to people who were naturally stronger, more motivated, or more talented than you. Perhaps you thought confidence appeared before action, or that lasting change required dramatic effort. But the truth has always been much simpler. The life you want has never been built on extraordinary moments. It has always been waiting behind ordinary decisions. You have seen how broken promises quietly weaken trust in yourself. You have also seen how one honest commitment, repeated day after day, slowly rebuilds that trust. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become more dependable. You stop measuring yourself by your intentions and begin measuring yourself by your actions. That is where real transformation begins. The purpose of these pages was never to convince you to become perfect. Perfection is impossible, and it has never been necessary. The purpose was to remind you that a meaningful life is not created by occasional moments of greatness. It is created by ordinary promises, honored with extraordinary consistency. You do not need to wake up tomorrow and rebuild your entire life. You do not need to change every habit, solve every problem, or reach every goal at once. You only need one promise, the promise that belongs to today. There's a story about a man named Yusuf who spent years believing he was incapable of change. He had started countless routines and abandoned almost all of them. Every new beginning ended with the same disappointment. Eventually, he stopped believing his own promises because experience had taught him that they rarely lasted. One evening, he made a different choice. Instead of creating another ambitious plan, he promised himself that every night before bed he would spend 10 quiet minutes learning something new. Some evenings he read. Other evenings he watched an educational lesson or practiced a new skill. The activity changed, but the promise stayed the same. 10 minutes every day. There were weeks when progress seemed invisible. There were moments when he wondered if such a small commitment could possibly matter. But he continued because he'd stopped chasing quick results. His goal was no longer to transform his life overnight. His goal was simply to become someone who kept his word. A year later, the lessons he had learned were valuable, but they were not the greatest reward. The greatest reward was the person he had become. He trusted himself. He believed his own promises again. He approached new opportunities with quiet confidence because he knew he could rely on himself. His life changed, not because of one remarkable decision, but because he repeated one ordinary decision often enough for it to become part of his identity. That same possibility now belongs to you. Picture yourself 1 year from today, not the version of you who waits for the perfect mood, not the version who keeps starting over. Picture the version of you who has honored one meaningful promise every day. Think about how you would walk into a room, how you would speak, how calmly you would face challenges, how much trust you would have in your own decisions. The greatest difference would not be found in your schedule or your achievements. It would be found in the relationship you have with yourself. Because once you trust yourself, everything else begins to change. There will still be difficult days. There will still be moments when excuses sound convincing and comfort feels tempting. You will not always feel motivated. You will not always feel confident. But none of those feelings have the power to decide your future unless you give them that power. Your next decision is far more important than your next emotion. Do not wait for another Monday. Do not wait for a new month. Do not wait until life feels easier. The future you want is not waiting for perfect circumstances. It is waiting for today's promise. When you finish this book, resist the urge to make a list of 20 new goals. Resist the temptation to redesign your entire life before sunset. Instead, choose one promise that truly matters. Make it honest. Make it realistic. Make it meaningful enough that keeping it will strengthen your trust in yourself. Then keep it. Tomorrow, make another one. And keep that one too. Over time, you will discover that your life did not change because of one extraordinary breakthrough. It changed because you refused to stop honoring the small promises that quietly shaped your character. One day, perhaps a year from now, you will look back at this moment with gratitude, not because this was the day everything changed, but because this was the day everything began. So close this book with hope. Not because hope alone creates change, but because hope combined with action always does. The next promise you keep may seem small, it may even feel ordinary, but never underestimate what one ordinary promise can become when it is honored every single day. Conclusion. Every meaningful life is built long before the world notices it. Long before success becomes visible, long before confidence becomes unshakable, and long before dreams become reality, something far more important is taking place. A person is quietly becoming someone who keeps their word. That is the true purpose of discipline. It is not about waking up earlier than everyone else. It is not about working longer hours or chasing perfection. Discipline is the daily practice of living in alignment with the promises you make to yourself. It is the quiet decision to choose responsibility over excuses, consistency over intensity, and long-term purpose over temporary comfort. Throughout this book, one truth has remained constant. Every promise you keep strengthens the person you are becoming. Each small act of discipline may appear insignificant on its own, yet together they create a character capable of achieving extraordinary things. The greatest transformation is rarely found in a single breakthrough. It is found in hundreds of ordinary moments when you choose to honor your commitment, even when no one is watching. There will be days when progress feels invisible. There will be moments when doubt returns and the easier path calls your name. Those moments are not signs that you are failing. They are opportunities to prove that your commitment is stronger than your circumstances. A disciplined life is not measured by the absence of difficulty, but by the decision to remain faithful to what matters most. Never believe that a promise is too small to matter. Great lives are not shaped by occasional acts of greatness. They are shaped by repeated acts of integrity. Every page you read, every workout you complete, every distraction you resist, every difficult conversation you choose to have, and every commitment you honor becomes another brick in the foundation of the life you are building. 1 year from today, you will not simply possess better habits. You will think differently. You will make decisions differently. You will carry yourself differently. Most importantly, you will trust yourself in a way that cannot be purchased, borrowed, or given by anyone else. That trust becomes the source of lasting confidence, meaningful success, and genuine freedom. As you close this book, resist the temptation to chase dramatic change. Instead, embrace the quiet power of today's decision. You do not need to promise yourself a perfect future. You need only make one meaningful promise and keep it with complete honesty. Then, when tomorrow arrives, do the same. Allow each day to become another vote for the person you choose to become. Let consistency replace hesitation. Let discipline replace doubt. Let your actions speak more loudly than your intentions. The distance between the life you have and the life you desire is crossed one promise at a time. Make today's promise, keep it. Then build your future the same way it has always been built. One promise, one day, one decision, one life transformed.